Hey, it's Chris Knight, founder of Self-Intelligence. Welcome to another episode of the Self-Intelligence podcast, where everyday people just like you can get free expert guidance and support to resolve any personal problem or drama you're experiencing. In this episode, I speak with Mandy about her relationship with her husband. Mandy is fed up with dealing with the same old triggering situations that come in cycles that are getting more frequent and out of control. Mandy and her partner have tried couple counselling and psychology, but have yet to find any improvement. For the listener of this podcast, it's important to keep in mind that this episode was an introductory session that offers a clear understanding of a new way to deal with relationship triggers and problems. Throughout this session, it may seem that I'm putting all the responsibility on Mandy for the issues she's facing. I want to assure you that that is not the case at all. In no way do I or the teachings of self-intelligence condone poor behavior, mistreatment, or disrespect in relationships or any situation. But when first learning about radical self-responsibility, it can seem that way. In taking full responsibility for her own inner state, Mandy will be empowered to deal with the situation from a place of wisdom, love, and truth, which is the only way to truly transform toxic situations in the long run. Thank you, Mandy, for revealing the challenges you are facing and being open to see and reveal your blind spots that many people will be able to relate to. Thank you, Mandy, for coming on and bringing up the important subject that is at the heart of many dramas and suffering in people's lives, relationship, right? This has certainly taken up the most bandwidth or stage, if you like, in the thousands of sessions I've done over the last 15 years is help me out with what's going on in this relationship, triggers emerging, what to do, how to address these. We haven't been taught this stuff at school, right? There wasn't courses and information that was helpful, at least, and from our parents either in most cases, right? So very brave and courageous to come on and expose this stuff because it's going to be so just relatable to whoever essentially listens to this. So your request has come in brief, seeking to understand why the same fight or issues keep on regularly occurring in your marriage and how to address this. So we had a brief discussion just a moment ago about some of the triggers. I like to call them triggers, right? You can relate to being triggered.
Definitely relate to being triggered.
And so it's got to the point where you felt like, okay, this has got to get sorted out, right? This has got to get resolved somehow, some better way to address this. So tell me a bit about your relationship. How long have you been in this particular marriage?
We've been together since 2006 and married since 2009. So quite a while.
So from the perspective that you're learning here, self-intelligence being the intelligence of yourself and understanding your own inner workings, has it occurred to you that perhaps some of the challenges are coming from within yourself?
Absolutely, that's occurred to me, and that's one of the reasons why I was really keen to do this session with you. Was very much because I'm of the view that I need to look at what I'm contributing to this, and the only way that things are only going to get better is if I actually dig into that and understand what my contribution is and how I can change. That may actually break that cycle.
Nice. It's a rare thing to come to that. It's much easier to see the shortcomings of other people, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that I've recognized in myself is that, and, we've done marriage counselling, we've done counselling separately with psychologists. And the thing that I recognised that I was doing was I was always looking to blame him for not doing anything and changing. And, that I think over the years has led to a lot of resentment and anger and all of those sorts of things. And I also think has probably made me really defensive. So I'm always looking to be on guard. So if he says anything, it's just like, no. And maybe I always want to be right too, which is one of the things that he always throws at me when we're having a fight. You always have to be right. And I started thinking about that and I'm like, wow, maybe I do have to be always right. And I'm, constantly holding on to this shield to deflect any, I'm so defensive about taking on board that constructive criticism, and I'm not to say that I'm all to blame, but I think for a long time, maybe I've paid lip service to actually wanting to make the change, and I've actually just been blaming him for everything and not really acknowledging my contribution.
Yeah, and it's easy to do because people do really bizarre things, or they behave in such ways that irritate and are unnecessary and certainly unreasonable. So it's very easy to blame. It's the easiest thing to do. The more challenging thing to do is to end this war, right? Because when you talk about defensiveness, you're talking about a war. When you talk about being right, you're talking about propping up a structure within yourself, which is the idea you have of yourself. Mandy, this is me. And he essentially does things to dismantle you in a sense. And that being right keeps you propped up, right? It's like, no, I know what's happening here and so on. And of course, most of these things happening with mundane things, domestics, and very, some things serious, like big decisions and that, but oftentimes quite trivial, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's really amazing to learn this type of work that actually allows you to learn from them and learning to listen, the real capacity to listen, because defensiveness, the ears are closed. And often that's the role of a psychologist or counselor or myself, for example, is to actually have you not defended and maybe then able to listen, these types of things. So give me an example of one of these reoccurring or same fights that is coming to you, or maybe just a trigger that has come to mind that you would like to use as a vessel into the learning of how to go inward rather than go into the blame cycle. It's
as simple as if anything goes wrong in our relationship, and that can be a whole range of different things, like we're running late for a function, or we didn't move quickly enough on an opportunity, so we missed out on the opportunity. My husband always appears to throw that blame back on me. In my opinion, it always feels like everything is my fault, and he does not own any form of responsibility for where we find ourselves in those kinds of opportunities or circumstances. And I just, there are times when I can just take that on the chin and just not react. And then there are other times, depending on what's going on in my world, where I just lose my shit. Yeah.
What's a particular time that comes to mind? One of those ones that really got you, like if there's anything that is like this time I got blamed for this particular thing and it just...
we had an opportunity to purchase a holiday home, and I was probably reluctant. It wasn't the area that I was, in my opinion, I thought was probably the best in terms of a great investment. And I was kind of sitting on the fence and really not that keen. And then eventually kind of went, actually, yeah, it's probably not a bad idea, so let's go for it. And by the time I'd made that decision, we had missed the opportunity, and prices had risen and all of those sorts of things. So in some ways I did contribute to that being a missed opportunity, but it just it was the trigger that opened a wound, I think, of all of those things that I get the blame for. And it just, did not go down well, did not end well.
What sort of degree of turmoil did this bring to the relationship?
Yeah, I mean, and this is the thing where, I was saying to you why we kind of fall into this cycle of what I think is a toxic way of managing those difficult conversations. And when we have that kind of conflict, it does escalate into, full-blown, almost what I feel like is crisis, where it just gets really personal, like we say terrible things to each other, then he'll go to the place of, I really don't love you. I don't want to really be in this relationship, but I feel like I'm stuck. I don't trust you. The words that you say, your actions don't follow on from that. Even to some points where he gets so despondent that, he talks about not having a future and wanting to take his own life and, things like that. So it gets really horrible. And that's a cycle. And, I don't know if there's something underlying for him, but I can't change that. But I can change the way that I react in those situations. And it's horrible and it's soul destroying for both of us.
It's probably important to mention at this point, human beings aren't necessarily happy with being here, with the vulnerability of it and the fact that we don't know a lot and we're not in control of a lot. And there's so much at stake, and it's terrifying. As a separate self in this, floating universe, with all of the possibilities of suffering and pain. And it's not thought about that like that very often at all in the general day-to-dayness of people's lives. But behind it, there is this resentment just for being here, for being conscious of knowing you're going to die at some point. There's these basic levels of trauma, actually just being born, that manifest in very colorful ways all over the place, right? And we see this in addiction, we see it in distraction, we see it in toxic behavior and all of this stuff. And when you get into a relationship, you are sharing all of that together. You're sharing that, but not talking about that, not looking at that, not looking at the fear that you have just by being alive. Most people don't even know that they're in any fear. Doesn't even exist. Like, I'm not afraid. What are you talking about? It can take me months to show someone that there's fear. And then they see it. Once they see it, it's like, oh my gosh, that's been running everything. Every decision I'm making is based on this stuff, right? But instead of that, I wouldn't feel this way if you would do this and did that and met this need and that thing and so on, right? In relationship, there becomes this sense of, I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't. It's very difficult to meet this endless pit of needs to appease this underlying dissatisfaction that can never be filled by anything. Although we both tell ourselves, if we succeed in this and we get the holiday house and we go traveling and we get up the corporate ladder and we do all this, we'll be happy, we'll be happy, we'll be happy, we'll be happy like this, right? And it's like, but you know who's in the way? You're in the way. If you weren't in the way, I'd be already there by now. If you were there and this type of thing, right? And it's like, I'd be the happy person with the best investment if it wasn't for you, you see? And you would be happy if it wasn't for him blaming you and doing this thing and that, you see? So oftentimes a much bigger perspective is required to go, wait a second, where is all this coming from? Like, there's a deep sense of unease that started well before we even met that was not addressed. Are you intrinsically happy? What is that? I'm only happy when I get what I want. I'm only happy when things go my way. I'm only happy when I'm acknowledged and attention is given to me. What do you mean intrinsic happiness? What is this? When I say those words to you, what does that mean to you when I say intrinsic happiness?
To me, that just means I feel fulfilled with just the way that my life is. And it's not dependent on things or, life is good,
How often are you in touch with intrinsic happiness? Happiness that's not externally derived?
Not as much as I would like to think that I am, that's for sure.
So the dramas in a relationship are actually this to support you to anchor yourself more and more centered in what I'm saying right now, that intrinsic place of peace, that even if there's drama going on, even if there's bad things happening, because bad things happen, there's this underlying stability within yourself that is able to witness all of this taking place. And in its very witnessing capacity, it's intrinsically joyous, if you like. It's a very subtle thing. And we're not pointed to this place as we grow up. And in our conditioning and our society does not point to this place. We're pointed to everything else but this place, actually. If you would like to download a free beginner self-recognition guided meditation audio to start your journey of healing and freeing yourself from the inside out, see the link in the description or go to selfintelligence.com. So the starting point to a relationship healing is to discover where you are at ease despite the external circumstances. And then it's going, okay, that is there. And that comes through what I teach is self-recognition practices. They're like essentially like meditation, but the inquiry goes into the who I am. And the who I am inquiry, you realize you are this You are beyond your mind. You are beyond your body. These things are not who you are fundamentally, because you are witnessing these things. You are clearly. It's a very clear experience. It's a very practical experience. It's not like a mystical, like woo, like this. It's just like, oh wow, yeah, that's what's happening. You know what I mean? It's very simple, and it's like, okay, if I am to bring my attention to that, I just feel just this neutral but alert, alive space of happiness. It's just there, sort of thing. This is critical. Now, once that is known to be there, it is very then much clearer as to what contaminates that space. And everything that comes in that contaminates that space becomes a false sense of yourself. So that's the roles, that's what you think you want or what to achieve or what you believe success is, and all these things. Essentially, the external idea of happiness is everything you identify with, and then try to control life to find its way down your very narrow view of that. And it's like, if life shows up like this, I'll be happy. I call that the my life story. Now, when you get into a relationship, what happens is another being is being forced into that narrow tunnel. So he's forcing you into his and you're forcing him into yours. And there's this idea that we can compromise, right? You know, like if you give me a bit, then I'll be good. And if I give you a bit, then you'll be good, right? And it's like, well, we sort of can keep that up for like 2 seconds and then we're in the power struggle again. Now, if I am to be proven to be right, then you have to come and meet my narrow view because I'm right, you see. Even look, I asked 10 million people I'm right. They know I'm right. I'm right. So you should enter my narrow space. Do you feel the stubbornness in relationship? Do you feel the stubbornness? Right. There's this stubborn, like, I'm not coming. I don't care how right you are and how insane I am. I'm not coming. Right? Do you get that sense? It's like impossible.
Yeah, totally. And then I also go into sarcasm mode, you know, which is like, I'll just dripping with sarcasm. Yeah, I'll accept what you're saying, but it's so not accepting what you're saying.
Oh, yes. Sarcasm is clearly judgment disguised as humor. So let's be clear about these things. I've got this my life story and he's got his my life story. And both of them are delusional because both of them aren't based on reality. Both of them are just based on what we think is going to make us happy. So the holiday house, so the this, so the that, so the da-da-da-da. This is in the my life story and it's going to both make us happy. You see, like this. Now, when that's the case, everything becomes now extremely important and it's not important. So it puts a lot of undue stress and pressure on things to make up for what doesn't even need a thing at all. Because when you come back to your center, the who am I? Who am I? If I was to ask you right now, who are you? What could you say that is?
Oh my God, that's that's such a hard question because I don't really know.
That's a great answer, you know, Mandy. That's a very intelligent answer. But that's not how you walk around every day, is it?
No. There's a lot of different Mandys that show up depending on who it's for.
Yes. But if asked directly, it's like, I mean, I'm so confident in who I am, and yet directly, I have no idea, right? So can you see then the weight that goes on to these things now? If I don't know who I am, then how important are all those things now, right? They're now critical. Who you are is the most important first question in a relationship. Who am I? That can go from roles, then it can go to strengths, weaknesses, it can go to personality attributes, it can go to behaviors, it can go to emotional states, it can go to memory, past, it can go to I'm my name, I'm Mandy, you know, that's who I am, I'm Mandy, you know. And it's like, well, okay, if that's who you are, what if we change your name? Then I don't know. Well, then, okay, so I changed my name to Cindy. And I'm like, okay, so which one are you, Cindy or Mandy? Which one? You're like, oh, well, yeah, I stay, but the name changes. I'm not my name, you see. Thoughts, beliefs. I'm my beliefs, you see. I'm my belief. That's what I am. I'm my beliefs. It's like, well, how many of those have stayed and gone and changed? Well, maybe I'm not them either, because if the belief can leave, then I should have left with it. Maybe I'm my values. I value love, and I value freedom, and I value these and I value that. Right? If I gave you a values list, which I have done many times, your values list will change. Even over a week, your values list will change. Who am I? Now, you often don't get that question in couples counseling, not that I know of, right, as the first question. But in self-intelligence, it's self-intelligence. Who am I? So I have a thing called the wake-up experience, where we go very deeply into this and experientially. And you discover that you are this intrinsic awareness. Now, I'm saying that to you right now, and it may seem conceptual, but it very simply, by looking at everything I mentioned, and even looking at your own body, even looking at your own thoughts, even looking at that voice in your head, it's like I'm looking at all of this. And the I who's looking at all of this is not anything. It doesn't even have a shape or anything like that. It just is. It's just I'm somehow aware of these things. I couldn't say what it was. Sometimes in this awareness, I'm interested in these things, but then that goes, but I'm still aware of that. So I can say, I was interested in this, and now you can say to me, now I'm not interested in that, because I was the awareness of both. Even memory, you could say this, Mandy. You could say, people say it all the time. I'm not, my memory's not as good as it was. So how do you know that? Right? How do you know that you must be aware that your memory was sharp and your memory is not so sharp anymore. You are beyond all of that as this very simple, very obvious awareness. If you would like to discover who you really are beyond the voice in your head and emotional states that cause relationship drama, stress, health issues, procrastination, sabotage, addictions, essentially all the drama and personal problems you can think of, come and join me for the Wake Up Experience, which is the first step in freeing yourself from the inside out. See the link in the description for more details. That's the first step in doing the work, is to discover and realize that. Then you have a situation like this, like what your husband's bringing to you, right? And he will say, I want to buy this house, something or other. And in come a flood of thoughts and past ideas and memories, and all of this comes across the screen of your consciousness. But when he says something at this point in time, it's hitting up against this version of you have inside, like there's a Mandy in you. But when I asked you directly, you know that's not it, because you're like, I don't even know. I couldn't say what that is. You see what I mean? But in general life, you actually feel like there is a me, a very tangible me that life is relating to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So if he said to you, Mandy, you're just an idiot, it would hit this Mandy, wouldn't it? It would hit Mandy. Do you see what I'm saying? And you go, oh, that hurt. I can feel that word rubbed up against the idea of me. And you realize as you become more aware that was what happens, is it's hitting up against thought. It hits up against conditioning. It hits up against a sense of yourself that's based on the past and based on the future. And then now you can inquire to the truth of these thoughts. So before, there's not an inquiry that can happen because you think it's reality. If he says that, then that's that. Like, it's hit me, and then the me that it hit was a reality. But we've just discovered it wasn't. There's not even a reality to that. I don't know what it is. You see, that's what you said. So now you can go, well, how true is the thought that I have in response to these things is what now comes. So this comes in some kind of, there's a couple of key thoughts you're looking for. Should and shouldn't, it'll hit up against. What if, it'll hit up against. I need, it'll hit up against. Some limiting belief, it'll hit up against. I walked out of the gym the other day. I had a sauna. It's not a swimming pool, but I walked out like it was a swimming pool. So I didn't have a shirt on, just had a towel and had my swimmers and had my thongs, and that's all I had. And it was extremely predictable what the thoughts were going to be of the people who saw me, because the context is the gym, not a swimming pool, right? So the thought is, what is that person wearing? Or they shouldn't be doing that, or whatever the case. And you see it in the body language, right? And it happened, right? It happened as that, the body language happened. And it's that predictable. So the thought comes in and then the thought gets believed. He shouldn't be wearing swimmers at the gym. That's it. That's as far as it goes. And then I walk out and that's it. And then they think about something else. It goes wherever it goes, you see. So we have these conditioned thoughts constantly going on, unchecked, unwatched, unlooked at, unquestioned, believed to be reality. Because if I was walking around on the beach or if I was walking around at the swimming pool, guess what, Mandy? No thought. There'd be no thought at all. So the challenge in relationships are there all these thoughts going on and perceptions that there's no awareness that they're even happening, and they're believed to be a fact. One of the things I want you to pay attention is the word you use quite a bit at the start of this session, which is always. What does always imply now that I brought it up as a word?
Constant.
And is there possibility for there to be anything else? If something's locked into always, then that's locked in now. He always responds to me like this when this happens. So is there a possibility of something else happening? Not in your consciousness. This is always what happens. And we're very good at getting proof. For sure, it may be a large percentage of times things like this take place and that. But we become very clear about, oh, wow, look at how I actually lock reality in and orchestrate myself to prove it to show up a certain way. So shouldn't, we could start there. So he blamed you for not getting the property, not having this external thing be the be all and end all of life. What should or shouldn't he have done in that situation?
He should have just accepted that that's where things ended up. I don't see the value in attributing blame.
Okay. So you say you should accept me. And in the same breath, you're not accepting him. So just take it as an observation. He is showing you non-acceptance and you then are reflecting non-acceptance.
Yep.
The reason that can happen is because it seems more reasonable that I'm not accepting this. You've attacked me and I'm not accepting your attack. That makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yep.
But what's not accepting what he's saying is a thought you believe to be you. Because when he says what he says, it's taken personally, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's saying that to me, but we discovered that doesn't exist. Okay. But that's not how it feels, does it? It feels very real, like that's what's happening. Okay. So now that now there's a bit of a looseness on the grip of that, you can go, no, I can look at this. I can see he shouldn't accept me. Okay, there's my thought that I'm suffering. I'm not suffering what he's saying. I'm suffering that I believe that thought that I have about it. So now that I know that I'm suffering the thought I have about it, I can ask another question, which is, what does it mean? What does it mean now that he hasn't accepted this? What does it mean? You tell me what your mind tells you what it's going to mean now that he hasn't accepted this.
I don't know, Chris.
Okay, this is good. This is good. When you say I don't know, because the answer is really simple. That's easy to get to. When I say simple, it doesn't mean easy. Okay, like jumping off a cliff is simple, but it's not easy, even if there's water down there, right? So what does it mean for you if he responds this way to you? What's the possible outcome?
I don't know.
Let's put it in the context of someone else. Can make it a bit easier sometimes. So maybe it's your mother and father, and your father does something that your mother doesn't like. Maybe it's drinking or something like this. And then it's like, okay, Mum, what's it going to mean if he does that? What could happen? Well, if he does that, it means that he's just going to sit there on the couch and watch TV all day, and we're never going to connect with each other. It means he's going to get sick and die, and then I'm going to be left alone. It means that, and we create these things, you see.
That's a really interesting one, because that's very much from my childhood. But see, I almost feel like there is reality of what happens when he does that.
Of course. Now, I'm going to get clear about that. But what you have to face in the instant is that is not a fact. In the instant, you see. Because what you'll start to learn is, as you become more understanding of your internal self, is that we orchestrate these things to happen. Because our reactivity from fear just produces more of what we fear. But what we believe is if we act from fear, we won't get what we fear. But the universal law is you get what you fear. So you will turn that fear into a reality. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think I have a lot of fear.
Everybody does. That's the point. That's the point of doing the internal work, is to go, what am I fearing that isn't rational, isn't reality, but the fact that I invest in it, then I start to create it. Does that make sense? Right. So he blames you. You have your judgment about that. What he should accept me. He shouldn't be non-accepting of me, right? Which of course is already a contradiction, but that's fine. And then I'm asking you, well, what does it mean if he does this?
I'm struggling. I don't know.
Because what this is bringing up is what you find unbearable. It's hard to face it, if you like. Plus, it's not in your awareness at this point. What I have found, I just want to let this land with you, right? And you can see where it sits for you. But a lot of the fear that a human being has, particularly when it relates to other people, is the fear of being alone. I want to be clear about one thing before we go anywhere near fear, actually, is fear is one of the most denied experiences a human being has. There are people who are anxious and they understand that much. You know, I've got anxiety and these types of things. But it's very unconscious in the human race that most of our behavior is coming from a place of fear. And in most cases, when there's this idea that we're loving, it's also fear. So I could give you an example like of a string of possibilities that you can sit with for yourself. So I'm not putting this in. This is your train of thought. But because right now there's a challenge in navigating what the meaning is, why am I asking you what the meaning is? Nothing has an issue until you put the meaning on it. You don't have suffering until you put the meaning on it. You can have pain and challenge, but you don't suffer until you put the meaning on it. So that's an important thing. All right. So like you don't have to, you fall off your bike and bang your knee and, scratch your arm. Like you don't have to put meaning on that for that to be painful. That's just going to be painful, you see. Yes. And a lot of things hurt. There's emotional hurt as well, mental hurt. All of those fall in the same category, but they sort of come and go. They spike and come and go. But when you have suffering, which is what you're talking about, which is like this prolonged, keeps going, it's not going away, it keeps kind of building, it's cyclical and all this kind of thing, that is being generated by meaning. So if he doesn't stop blaming me, well, it's likely that we're going to be in a fight. It means we're going to fight. It means that we're not going to communicate. It means that it's going to ruin tonight and I'm going to have a shit night. It means I'm not going to sleep. It means I'm going to have a crappy day at work tomorrow. It means I'm not going to want to talk to him, which is going to mean we're going to be further apart than we were again. It means that we're going to just keep distancing ourselves, basically managing ourselves to kind of not run into each other. It means that I'm going to feel more alone in the sense of not having a partner that I can share with. It means I'm not going to feel supported. It means I'm eventually going to be here on my own. On one hand, there might be a side of you that's like, I'd love to be on my own. I mean, I'd love to not have this going on. But that's not what's driving the fear. That's not what drives the trigger. That's not what shuts you down in the face of him presenting himself to you. And so just notice after this session, the trail of thoughts that you have about where things are likely to end up if this thing doesn't stop, or if he keeps relating to you this way. It means I'm going to lose something. What do you stand to lose? What are one of the fears of the things that you stand to lose in this relationship?
Oh God, so much. My stepdaughters, our friends, the life that we lead, where we live, just the companionship and the fun that we have when everything is great.
So those things is if this behavior means that those things could be taken away, that's the meaning of loss that I'm talking about. All of that happens at lightning speed. It's like a perception. It's not like you necessarily are like having specific thoughts, but sometimes you will. But there's an overall sense of what you stand to lose creates fear, and then the fear creates the next thought and the next and the next that keeps generating the same pathway of behavior that you're like, we've got to deal with this differently. So what I'm showing you is you've got to actually track to the right in that moment, what was that thought that came in that you believed? Because it's ensuring whatever you're fearing is going to take place. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense. There's a fair bit to sort of track through with this, but I'm wanting to be fairly fundamental in the understanding to start with. I'm suffering the thoughts in my head. He's causing me challenges. Yes, that's happening. But that's not where the real pain's coming from. The pain's coming from how I perceive what's happening when it happens.
So if he says things like that, is it I'm perceiving like maybe I feel guilt and shame and because I feel like I've let him down or some.
What I've got is a process called shadow inquiry, which basically takes us down the path of seeing those things very clearly. The first step is just to realize that's the roots of it, right? That's the roots of it is there's thoughts perceived, they're being believed to be real and true and therefore suffered as that, okay? From there, you then are then going, okay, it's my job now to let them go essentially. That's my job. My job is to learn how to not invest in those thoughts. Yes, not to take them on because there isn't personal, okay? And one of the first inquiry questions is when you take a situation to an inquiry process is the triggering situation personal? And now you would sit there and go, okay, you feed it back through your mind. Yeah, he said, I'm an effing idiot and I'm ruining his life. That's personal. That's what you would see. You see what I'm saying? And then you go, okay, is that true? Now, only from the place that I just discovered that who I am is not the person I believe myself to be. Who I am is actually not a thing that can be taken into a personal place. So, for example, someone may shout at you on the street and you don't think much of it. They could even point you out and you may go, well, that's got nothing to do with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you could make it a lot about you.
Yeah.
Maybe on different days, like say you had a really bad day at work and you were picked on or something, bullied, right, by a workmate or something. And now this ranting lunatic comes out and starts yelling these things at you and it's the straw that breaks the camel's back and you're in a mess right now. Or let's say you had a best day of your life with a good friend and you had such a great day and this person starts ranting and shouting and all of a sudden you're like, this poor guy, he's lost. Do you see how selective it is when it's personal?
Yeah.
You just selected. One day it was personal, next day it's not personal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it doesn't exist. If it's personal, it's personal. You can't select when it's personal. What's challenging in relationship is to firstly come to full understanding experientially, this relating is not personal in the way that I thought. Then I can inquire to these things. Is this personal? Oh, yes, I saw how I took it personal. You can see that now. How did I take it personal? By these particular thoughts. What did I make it mean? Oh, man, I made it mean like this big, like unbearable loss. No wonder it's so triggering. Look what I connected it to. Okay. Oh, I can see why I'm so triggered. Is that actually true? Well, no, right? No, this is not actually a reality. It's only what I'm thinking about. Okay, now you're starting to settle already. And you'll notice I'm not talking to him or doing anything with him. I'm just dealing with myself. Whereas when you're in blame, you're trying to manipulate or control the way they behave so you feel good inside. True or not?
Yeah.
Yes. And it's very, very easy to say, it's not very nice to say things like this and it doesn't make people feel good to say things like this. And that's very reasonable, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't stop him doing it though, does it?
No.
So it's not going to work like that. Okay. So you go, okay, not going to try that anymore.
Yeah.
Come back to myself. Are you entitled to a different situation?
I would hope so.
So entitled. Are you entitled to a different situation? Initially you say, Yes, but then what changed that? What did you feel about that?
It's perhaps the connotation that goes with being entitled,
Which means what?
that it's all about you, and there's this negative feeling that goes if somebody's entitled, it's a really negative connotation. It's selfish. It's not a good thing.
Well, is it a fact? Because that's what I'm dealing with. I'm dealing with facts, right? Because the mind is a fiction. The mind is a fiction that goes on reality. Reality is the fact. Mind paints whatever it wants to paint on top of it. Yes. So when we talk about entitlement, I'm asking you, are you entitled? I'm asking you as a fact.
Well, that's where, yes.
You don't seem very confident about that, yes?
Well, I think as people, we're all entitled to be treated the right way.
We're talking about reality though. Okay, so let's go back to that person yelling at you on the street. And you would say, well, I'm entitled to be treated like a decent human being. I've just, worked all day, paid my taxes, Does reality show up like that?
No.
So what's the fact? That you're entitled or that it doesn't exist?
That it doesn't exist.
All right, so that's the fact, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so coming out of suffering is to come into alignment with the fact, not with the delusion that's against reality, because reality is showing up as reality. Does reality change to what you think it should?
No.
So are you going to continue going with what you think reality should do, or are you going to get on board with reality?
If it's going to be better, then you need to get on board with reality.
Now, does getting on board with reality mean that people just take advantage of you and use you and abuse you and all of these things? Because you remember, you mentioned a lot about defensiveness, right?
Yeah.
What are you defending against? You're defending against reality. And why are you defending against reality?
The things that I feel like I'm defending against is because I don't think it's just or fair.
When there's someone that's in your perceived control, then you'll go to town on that. I'm going to make you fit my idea of that. Whereas a stranger on the street yelling and ranting at you, I'm not going to get into that with you because it's not my reality. You are just yelling shit at someone and you see, well, this is not that personal, is it? But my partner, this is personal. I want to ask you a very interesting question. How do you determine when something has gone from impersonal to personal?
Herein lies the trigger points. I think that it can depend where, like I said right at the beginning, of where I am at that particular point in time and like if I'm feeling vulnerable, if I've had a shit day, if I'm tired or exhausted, or if it hits to something that's really deeply ingrained, like, for example, if he says something that is really critical of, like, my mum, who I hold really dear, or something like that, that hits, that's personal. Like it's personal when it hits to something that I hold true or dear, I think.
Exactly. So what I hold true, it gets personal, yes.
And particularly if I hold it true about myself, like what I think I was saying to you earlier, like if he says something, because like I will often say to him when we get really down in the spiral and it's getting nasty, and I'll say to him, but I'm a good person and I'm a nice person. I don't do anything that's out of a place of, not coming from a good place. And that hurts so much.
Yes, so because then you believe you're entitled.
Am I entitled, or do I believe I am? Is that entitled? I don't know.
What's the purpose of being a good person?
To do good, like to help people.
You're saying, why do you treat me like this? I'm a good person.
Yeah, because what my intent is to do good, not to hurt you.
When you say to him, why do you do this? I'm a good person. How does that help you to say that?
It makes me feel better.
So you're more justified in your thoughts. So then you get more control.
I don't know if it makes Oh, Matt, you could be right. To me, it's just maybe like a self-soothing, self-passive, If he's not going to acknowledge that I'm a good person, then I'm bloody well going to tell you that I'm a good person and you can get fucked.
Okay. And being a good person gives you what?
That's my identity.
Oh, so when I asked you earlier, who are you? You would have said, I'm a good person.
Yeah, maybe.
Can you really define what a good person is?
When I define, I don't know. Like when I think of who a good person is, it's somebody who wants to help people, makes people happy. That to me is a good person.
So why didn't you buy the property when he wanted you to buy the property?
Because I wasn't sure it was a great investment.
Are you being a good person right now, though? Aren't you supposed to be making him happy? Aren't you supposed to be doing good things to people? And all you've done is put him in stress and taking away an opportunity from him because you're so self-absorbed in your own concerns that weren't really based on anything other than your own judgments. Is this a good person?
I would have thought so, yes, because that I'm stopping us from making a bad decision.
And is that how he sees it?
No.
Is a good person self-centered?
No.
So can you see that those possibilities all raise their heads within this idea of being a good person?
What do you mean by that?
Whenever you look at something closely and earnestly, you see that a lot of the time, whatever you're thinking is based on a whole bunch of assumptions. So you live your life largely identified by being a good person.
Yeah.
You're quite solid in your resolve about what that is, right?
Yeah.
There are a whole range of questions you can ask that put a fracture in that idea, because the good person that who you so-called are has a lot of drama going on. Now, if you believe you're a good person and you stay maintained in that belief, then you don't have a choice but to defend this idea.
Right. Yeah.
You have to be right, actually, Mandy. You have to be right, because how could a good person be wrong?
Yeah.
So then you question, well, wow, if this idea of being a good person necessitates that I am always right, and that in any situation that I'm being challenged, I have to defend, I'm saying, is that the nature of a good person? Defensive and has to be right. Is this the quality of a good person?
No.
So have we fractured the idea of what a good person is?
Yeah.
Be earnest from your heart. Have we fractured what the idea of a good person is?
No, I don't think that's right. A good person can be wrong.
Can you see that the idea of being a good person generates this notion of being right?
Yeah. It's almost like generates that it's a noble thing.
So the good person, I call it good person syndrome, actually. And it's a sickness that causes so much drama. And when human beings come out of delusions like being a good person, they become the good person they thought they were, but in a very different way. Because whilst you believe you're a good person, you're at war. Good's always in war with the bad. Peace does not exist with the good person. You'll be the one defending right and wrong and just and all of this. And you are actually the polarity exchange of good and bad. You keep it going.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying, because that need for acknowledgement of being a good person.
It's a challenging thing to trust that actually things work out much better, and you will see it directly when I'm not identified as being this good person. You have to see evidence of that. It'll show in your experience. Fights don't take place the way they used to. Suffering doesn't happen the way it once did. Things can come and be let go of. Flow takes place. There's more of a spontaneousness. There's love actually here that's not based on right and wrong. And I'm able to look after myself much better, not from a righteous place, but from a place of truth. The good person is confused because it's not true. One of the questions to ask yourself is, what are the judgments you have towards him? So he blames you, right, for this particular situation. And if you were to say you are, or, you know, in a name calling fashion, if you like, what would some of your judgments be? You are what?
Look, a big judgment I think that I throw at is that I feel like I've been taken advantage of, that he takes advantage of me, and the good person that I am. I'm his second wife. I've taken on and have contributed to, raising his two children who are not my biological children, but they are my children. And, he's just not grateful for everything that I've kind of have done.
Actually, I'm going to share my screen with you here. This is going to help you out. Ungrateful.
Yeah. Definitely vindictive. I would say that he's arrogant. I would say that he's cold, like there's a lack of empathy and warmth. It's just, it's the judgment. And I don't know if there's one word, but it's almost like manipulative, like the way that he can change the argument. So I feel like I'm so confused by, what he's saying. I just.
Great. This is perfect. So manipulative, vindictive, arrogant, cruel. These are all what seems to be opposite to a good person, right?
Yeah.
So what's going to be a little challenging to see is that the good person is all of those things. Where you will see that is in the thoughts that you have about what's taking place. You won't see it in the way that you are because you have a persona that is the good person. So it's not going to show up like that.
Yeah.
But the moment that we had that conversation where it said, he should have accepted this, and then I put it back to you, you realize you're not accepting it as he's saying it. So then I was like, oh, wow, I just saw myself in that moment happening.
Yeah.
You'll see the cruelty of the good person. You'll see the manipulativeness of the good person. You'll see the arrogance. How arrogant was I to believe that I knew what was right in this unknown universe? That was the height of arrogance. How am I cruel to him? By being so self-righteous that he has to beat himself up with shame because I don't inquire to my own thoughts, right? Where I can easily project that stuff on him. I'm cruel because I hold this position so I don't have to see that for myself. You'll see it. And then now you're relieved of it. It's like, oh, I'm no longer that polarity exchange anymore. And now you become, if you like, the good person, which is not personal. You become the essence of yourself, which is love and truth intrinsically. And the energetic of love and truth does not work in that way. It doesn't operate like that. It listens. It's radically honest. It's not playing a game. It's not in a tug of war. It's not trying to prove. It's a totally different vibration to be living from. And what happens is drama collapses in the essence, in the energy of that. And then you'll see that. You'll see it collapse. And it's like, oh, wow, I was holding a polarity. The good and the bad were having a showdown. Just like Agent Smith and Neo at the end of that movie, they collide and everything dissolves, you see? But while you are trying to defend your position, while you believe you are right as the good person, this war is only going to intensify. So I'm not saying in any relative sense that he is not exuding poor behavior and disrespectful behavior. I'm not saying that that's not happening. And I'm also not saying that this is your fault or anything along those lines, okay? All the purpose of this is to see something that was unaware of that kept perpetuating suffering, yes? Now, today we've only just glimpsed on a certain degree of understanding.
Yeah.
I've kind of touched on tiny little pieces of processes that are important to get acutely aware of for any real traction and shift to take place in a relationship that has history and, built up resentment and all these things, right? But what you've seen is this is deteriorating, right? This is just eroding. And the way out is by seeing yourself clearly. This is shadow work. Not many people want to do this because they don't want to see the reality of it. Do you know what I mean? It's like going away. I want you to really, if you want to believe there's a good person, I want you to create a really defined idea about that. And I want you to see in your daily life, is that a fact or is that this subjective kind of selective idea that comes and goes that's not actually a reality? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think some remarkable aha moments are going to come out of that. Because if you want to invest so heavily in this idea, what I'll ask you to do is really then look at it and see how true it is. It would be definitely something to follow up with you. And this is only the start point of a very steep learning curve, which it is for everyone. It's like, what? This is back to Frontland.
Definitely.
Yeah, I hope you're able to take a couple of things from this today and listen back to it. And there's a lot said today. And yeah, thank you for bringing this up because it's a very important subject.
Yeah, no, thank you for working me through it. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you got value out of this, please share it so that other people can benefit also. For more information about self-intelligence, including joining my next Wake Up experience or detailed information about my self-intelligence course, go to selfintelligence.com.